calling to order the Public Awareness, Personnel, and Policy Committee of the Vallecitos Water District, Monday, December 5th, 2022, 10 a.m. in the boardroom. I don't see any members of the public or public comment, so we will move right into the items for discussion. Personnel, new business, internships, scholarships.
Go ahead, Chris. Thank you. So Ben Crane's internship is winding down. He probably has about 2 more weeks with us. And I interviewed with Jacob Sheba, one candidate from Palomar, and we've selected him. His name's Evan Fox, and he will be starting at the end of January. And wanted to broach with the general manager, assistant general manager, board committee members. Jacob is noting that students have dropped out from being a possible candidate just due to the financial issues. There's a certain amount of time commitment to doing the internship here, 180 hours during what amounts to about 3.5 months. And
so you mean they're maybe choosing this over a paid job?
They're choosing their paid job over wanting to take the internship with us.
Gotcha.
So it's an unpaid internship. They get school credit, but some of them are all the candidates, seems to me, at Palomar that are in the water field have a job somewhere. Mm-hmm. That was an issue with first intern, and it's been an issue with Ben, his availability. Same sort of thing. And what I wanted to put forward to the committee and the assistant general manager and general managers, maybe we give one of those scholarships to that student. We make sure that the student that gets the internship gets a scholarship, both for fall and spring. It's just something to consider, that may be a way to help them out with their finances by not being available to work on the days that they're with us. And additionally, Jacob seemed to be under the impression that if we were able to, he would be able to talk to people at Palomar, and if we were be able to come up with $1,000 for a student as part of that scholarship program, that possibly the Palomar could do it as well, that they would almost match us on that.
Okay.
So just something for the board to consider. We've got a candidate. Once I issue the scholarships, I'm going to mention it to them, say, hey, why don't you submit a scholarship? But, maybe we just set aside money for that, and I'd like to hear your comments.
Yeah, I think we need to think creatively about it, and we've not ever talked about it being a paid position, but Ben actually was one of the recipients of the scholarship, and he is our intern. I think he might have some valuable insight as to whether or not it helped him. I love the idea of Palomar being able to kick in, or potentially being able to kick in a little bit. That strengthens the partnership if we were able to potentially set aside some money and then have Palomar match it. I think it's a great idea. I mean, everything is so expensive now. There's so many pressures on young people. It's I believe in people getting paid for work, and I think we should talk about it and consider it. And I don't think we can do anything this time around because we've already approved the budget. Mm-hmm. But maybe for the next budget, we talk about this and we make sure that we set aside some money. Would it also be, as you were telling me this, I was thinking, wow, we're already on our 3rd intern. Is it worth discussing that maybe the internship, the time period is less concentrated, so that if someone has a job outside, maybe we only have 2 interns a year and the time is expanded, that they're here, but for fewer hours. You know what I'm saying? So that we're not cycling through so many, but it enables people to, if they have another job, to not feel quite a pinch because they're spending, they have to come here for 4 or 5 hours every day. I think that might be something to talk about too. And
the parameters that we're dealing with on this specifically is that they are gaining a class from Palomar College. They get college credit, I think 3 units, and just like a regular college class, you've got to put in X amount of hours into your time.
Okay.
And We kind of have some restrictions on our end where Fridays don't work with us, that Mondays, Tuesdays seem to be what works best for our operations crews. So you've got these two, there's a little Venn diagram where there's the two portions that meet, and so it seems like we need to get, a lot of hours in on Mondays and Tuesdays. That's just kind of the way it's worked out.
And also from a staff perspective, strengthening the internship program and giving that extra incentive seems like a win-win for us. Obviously, with Palomar kicking in, what we can do, and if there's any expansion that can be discussed, obviously through a normal board committee and budgeting process. But since we have a program that's a fledgling program but ongoing, and even though this time we had an applicant who actually got the scholarship, it may not happen all the time. Tying them together makes not only the internship more attractive, but also it does kind of lock you in on who you give the scholarship to. However, most of the time, those are the people that we want to give it to, the people who want to work in the industry. So
Yeah.
it may not be an issue is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, some of the questions, so it's 180 hours over 3 months?
Little less, little more. The summer, it was really condensed. We did do a summer internship. It's a condensed period. The student will start like at the end of January, and I think is done, partway through May, so that may
Is
work
that
out.
school mandated? That's under some,
That's part of the internships. They have internships with other agencies as well, and if you're gonna get 3 units credit for it, it's 180 hours. That's what they're trying to
what are 3
achieve.
units at Palomar? I mean, is it still only like 15 or 75 bucks a unit usually? What is it? Do you know?
I don't recall, but I know it's actually almost free if depending on your,
It can be.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
I'm just in my head. Okay, so they get 3 units after this 3 months, unpaid internship, 180 hours. I mean, that is asking a lot, but I don't know. I still like it. I mean, yeah, it's a sacrifice, but that's okay. I don't know. I'm still old school on that. Yeah, it's going to be, definitely the scholarship. I agree. We should set aside that $1,000 or whatever to make it more attractive. But if you get one intern that really wants it, then he really wants it. Instead of just kind of throwing it out there and, letting the spaghetti, see what spaghetti hits the wall. We just actually get the one. I'd rather have really one individual that really wants it instead of 6 that think they're entitled to it. So I'm kind of old school on that, but yeah, whatever we can do to make it a little bit more attractive. But I don't know, the ones we've had, you said they've been pretty high quality, and there's a reason for that.
I haven't been disappointed at all.
Yeah, which means, they're gonna take a sacrifice, and yeah, it's gonna be hard. They're gonna have to take some time off, and we're gonna have to, find a way to squeeze in 180 hours other ways, but I don't know. That's, I know it sounds kind of harsh, but I like that one individual making a sacrifice and working hard and getting I think we do a great job here, I think.
Well,
The
and
amount of knowledge they learn in that 180 hours,
Maybe what I'm driving at is the student, Evan Fox, I'll talk to him when we issue the scholarships that comes out in the spring. But there may be a student in the fall of the calendar year that we want to save a scholarship application or dollar amount for. So I think it's okay to have those students still submit a scholarship application. But, it could be that, the committee of the board considers, hey, if we're gonna do 2 of these per year, maybe we set aside a certain amount of that scholarship money, so.
I think it's also important to think about, we've had 3, we're about to have 3 interns, all young men. If we are serious about trying to recruit women, people of color into the industry, then a little bit of money might help with childcare, or, if they're working a job and they can't take that hit. I think it might open the door to other folks being able to apply. I don't know that for sure. I don't know what the demographics of the department are. My suspicion is that they still probably match the demographics of the water industry at large, but it's an opportunity that if we provide some financial compensation, that it might enable us to attract more candidates. We've just got one. right now, right? We've got one that applied. That doesn't mean that he's a bad candidate, right?
No, he's a good candidate. I'm very pleased with the applicant.
Okay.
But Jacob did let me know that several students had implied that they were gonna do it. And then most of them backed out and said, I don't think I can,
Okay.
All
do
for
the-"
financial reasons?
Yeah, that's what Jacob told me, yeah.
Okay.
That
It might be interesting just to ask him, did you notice, were they women, were they people of color, just so that we can sort of vet that as an assumption, that if we provide some incentive, that it might open the applicant pool a little bit more to ease some hardships that people might be facing.
So we could bring this back to committee at the later time, to maybe ask Jacob a few more questions and bring back, the consideration really would be to how to handle future scholarships, at least what tied or not tied to the actual internship program. From here, if the committee wants to choose a recommendation, then we obviously could bring that forward to the full board.
Okay, what do you think? Sounds like you've got some questions.
Well, just how much effort does it take on our part to do this? I mean, does it take a lot of time on the district side to run an intern through the 180 hours?
It takes a bite out of me every week. And the staff person also rotates to different departments. And so the different departments get impacted every week. So there's impacts to the district. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. But, there's staff time that's taken up, and
Yeah, let me add a little bit to that. So I just met with this morning, and one reason I came in late is I had my O&M meeting with Ed Pedrazi this morning every other week, and this meeting just happened to fall right after. So we were just talking about the internship program. The guys love having the intern, the operators. They enjoy teaching. They enjoy that kind of passing on knowledge and showing. Not only they have a lot of pride in the work they do, but their productivity when they have the intern is definitely down because they're slowing down to teach the person. They can't work at their normal pace, can't do their normal stuff. However, for them, it's still a very positive thing. They enjoy the program. They wanted to see it continue, but it does take a hit on productivity. It's not significant in the grand scheme of things, but it does slow them down a little bit. But it's necessary to provide that teaching moment.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, I know it's, I think of myself as a pretty nice guy, but I love the program. Yes, I think it should continue. But do we as a district bend over backwards to make it easy for more applicants to apply and throw out the red carpet? And you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I think we're providing an amazing service for some applicant, whatever it may be, man, woman, color, to be honest, it doesn't matter. But whatever applicant, almost like, it's a sacrifice, but what you're gonna receive. So I don't know if we actually, market it and say, hey, we really want you to do it. It's like, here's a great program, and maybe we use those past ones, Ben and, what was his name?
Greg?
Ben and Greg Gauthier.
Ben and Greg,
yeah.
if they go report back to Jacobs, hey, this is what I learned, this is a great, and let them speak for themselves, let them speak for the program because it's been a good experience for them. And then those that are willing to sacrifice and maybe, give up a little bit to have an amazing, one, get 3 credits, one, have an amazing experience and get educated, great. And yes, there could be, I agree with the scholarship, give them the scholarship or hold those aside. But I don't know if we just, do backflips for them and try and go out and spin signs and say, hey, we're going to try and get as many as we can. It's like, the marketing side I'm saying is it's just, here's a great program. It's really good. Let Greg and Ben speak for themselves. Come on, if you want it, great. If not, we get one applicant, then that one applicant really wanted it more so than the other ones. And if it just doesn't work timing-wise for 4 of them that dropped out, then it just didn't work. But I don't think we have to revamp the whole program to see how we can get more people, different people, everything like that. Just here's a great program, it's available, and if we don't get any applicants, then we don't get an applicant that year, and we say, okay, darn it, and we'll see what happens the next year.
So I don't have the impression we're talking about revamping it. I think we're just talking about whether or not to provide some financial incentive.
Yeah,
in the
and
form
I think
of
we all
a
agree with
scholarship
that.
that we're already, we're already going to continue doing, and maybe just instead of awarding, I think we said we were gonna award 6, and we only had 5 that we gave out this year.
Yeah,
That we include one of these intern applicants as a recipient of one of those
I
scholarships.
100%, I agree on
I think
that.
we're both aligned with that.
Agreed, yeah.
So I think we're prepared to make that recommendation, right? That we do say that, if you are successful in being awarded the internship, that will be accompanied by a scholarship to help ease the financial burden. Yeah?
Exactly like that.
Okay.
And, this year, everybody got a little bit more than $1,000 because we didn't give out 6, but it will typically be around $1,000 because I think that was the original.
The only hard thing is Ben and Greg, it's like, wait a minute, now I didn't get
I
it.
know.
So, but yeah, I agree, it definitely should be hold up for that individual to get a scholarship. I agree, 100%.
Okay. I think we're on board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you, and thanks for that update, and I'm glad to hear that from the field that it's working, that it's positive.
Yeah.
It is an investment, and it's a sacrifice on our end too, but it's sort of playing the long game, so I appreciate hearing that it's overwhelmingly positive, or mostly positive. Okay, I think that's it for new business for personnel. We have nothing for public awareness. Thank you for continuing to send your outreach efforts by email, Chris. I really appreciate those. Policy, new business, conduct of committee meetings, location, Zoom broadcast.
Yeah, so this was brought up as far as an option of where we want to meet. There's been some talk about moving from this more formal atmosphere here in the board chambers to one of the conference room where it's more, roll up your sleeves and kind of work through problems, a little bit more intimate as far as the location. This is just brought up for discussion for the committee, for committee consideration.
For this committee?
For all committee meetings.
All committees.
And just to be clear, it can be any number of recommendations. It could be,
Hi, Chris, thank
each committee could decide on their own, or should we have options? And obviously, if there's a bigger item going to committee, it can always be relocated. So nothing is necessarily set in stone. It's just more or less, this is the room that has the ability to Zoom and provide that type of atmosphere. Some of the other rooms do not.
What are your thoughts?
I like the smaller atmosphere. Have you been to the committee room upstairs?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I understand benefits of both, but I'm more of a, sit around a table, and I just think it creates a little bit more of a informal talking environment.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too. I think it's important to just be transparent with the public. We don't typically get a lot of public attendance at our committee meetings, but I think it's important that so that we don't give the impression that we are being not transparent, because that has been brought up in the past, that we are transparent with the public about where we're meeting, and that they are welcome. And they can sit at the table or sit, in the perimeter, whatever. We have to sort of lay out those expectations. And I think if we do have something that's coming up in committee that all of a sudden we do have a lot of people, then I would like the flexibility to move it back in here so we can accommodate everybody. And I also think that, the committees can decide on their own whether they prefer, what they prefer. I don't want to make a policy that says we all have to meet in that room if people don't want to. But
Just all have the option to.
Yeah.
I agree with
I
everything.
like the options.
Agree with
So
everything
it would be fair for us, in the minutes of this committee, to say that the P3 committee recommends that each committee could decide whether they want to meet in the board chambers or in a conference room, and with the option, especially on a bigger item, to meet in the board chambers if we know we're going to have public, for example. As far as posting and transparency, that's going to be covered within how we post, the location, and what's available. We have different postings that are required, so Anthony takes care of that between Anthony and Ann. So this way it's transparent up front how individuals can attend, view, whether in person only or digitally they can do it, and so that'll be transparent.
Yeah, I think if we do move the we do move the meetings, you know, it does reduce the ability of folks to zoom in from the public. And I think that that's an important consideration. But I think that if we feel that we're going to have public attendance, I think it's,
We mean it.
yeah, we'll come in here and people can zoom in. It's hard to know in advance, but, you know, we usually don't have attendance at.
Yeah,
at
a lot of times,
meetings.
I mean, we'll know there's more hot button items. If we're looking at rate increases or something that there's gonna be people coming in, and staff will know, we get contacted often. If there's when are you gonna bring this committee? I wanna be there. So this
Oh,
way,
okay.
when we work with whoever the committee chair is, I mean, there's no guarantee we'll know, but many times we do.
Okay.
We could work with the chair and say, we think we're gonna have some public at this meeting. We recommend meeting in the board chambers.
Great,
We can do stuff like that.
I'm fine with that.
I like it. I like it too.
Great, so we'll go forward with, obviously, transparency with the posting is going to be always there, but we'll allow each committee to pick where they want to meet and recommend if we're going to have public meet in the board chambers.
So you've been on all the committees, or attended all the committee meetings.
Yes.
Is there public at any of them, to be honest?
There typically is not, but if, for example, sometimes when finance committee, you're going through a rate, or if we look at changing cap fees in the future, then a lot of times there'll be developers or public that come into those type of
At the
meetings.
finance one mainly?
It depends,
Engineering,
yeah.
all the other ones?
Engineering maybe, but really it's the finance one that will get public in, because it's usually affecting people's wallets.
Right, no, understood, yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, and I do like the idea of people continuing to be able to Zoom. I think it just makes the meetings more accessible. I think it makes it more accessible for us too. You know, for example, if we can't make a meeting, then we can Zoom in. I like that.
Conference room doesn't have that capability?
No, I think the training room may, but the individual conference rooms don't have the cameras. So I think the training room may, but don't quote me on that. It's got the Zoom capabilities. We set this room up during COVID to set it up for Zoom, and modified everything in here so it'd work for both in-person and Zoom. I don't think we've done that with any other rooms at this point.
So you just said something that is giving me pause. So the conference room does not have a camera. So how will we show the meeting?
We still
won't.
record it,
Oh, we do. Okay.
so.
So there's still the ability to post the meeting online like we've done.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So some talks with IT is they can set up the Zoom in the conference room as well. They're gonna play with it. I mean, nothing's gonna be set in stone or turned over tomorrow, but they are looking at options for setting up Zoom in the conference room. It may just be audio only, but from my talks with IT, they should be able to set up video or camera capability up there as well.
I mean, is it as simple as putting a laptop up there and they can?
That's something for IT folks if they're gonna do that up there. Again, they're exploring those options, but
So there is a computer and a monitor, not quite this big, but a fairly large monitor in every conference room. So when we present, there's a conference room computer, so there may be a way to do it. They probably just have to, I'm guessing they just probably have to set up a camera, because there's no camera in there. So there
Okay.
may be some abilities to do that. It may be, we may evolve, may grow into it, so we ask for the boards and committees to be a little patient as we set the system up. But no matter what, we'll have the ability to post at least voice recordings at minimum, and probably move to something more sophisticated.
They've been done in the past, right? Committee meetings have been done at the conference rooms?
So, historically, all committee meetings are in conference rooms, and then the board meetings are here, and any workshops are here. We used to have a big committee every now and then called Committee of the Whole, that used to be done in the training room. But historically, the only reason that we moved committee meetings here was because due to COVID, we weren't able to, this had more space for spacing out and the ability to Zoom, while before COVID, that was never a requirement.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay. Okay. I think we can make a recommendation that we're
Yeah,
fine.
and Anthony, thanks for the update. I'm out of touch from being off last week, so.
Let each committee decide where they want to meet, but we're good with conference room for all of them?
And staff will work on letting committee chairs know if there's a reason to recommend meeting in the board chambers.
Yeah, I think that's important, because because we don't always know. I mean, sometimes we do, sometimes we get, sometimes we get this, but we may not know.
Yeah, sometimes you guys know more than staff, especially on specific items. If you've been contacted, hey, we're concerned. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Old business, ordinance number 175 and 176. Are we gonna do these together or sequentially, do you think?
so Wes is on Zoom with us here.
Okay.
So Wes, are you gonna do these kind of together? Because they're both really, one's water, one's sewer, but it's really the same subject matter.
Yeah, we're really just gonna do them together because it's the same topic.
Okay, hi Wes, thanks for joining.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, sorry you're feeling under the weather.
Yeah, I got my little one got his first head cold, so
Oh,
he.
boy.
There'll probably be more to come in the future, I'm sure.
There will be.
Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah, this is really timing and capacity fees. They go together. They're indexed together. So it's really one topic, just two ordinances.
So as Wes kind of keys up the presentation, the committee may recall these were one of the items that was listed kind of in the sequences of different ordinances and policies to review. So Wes has done this presentation to the Finance Committee and to the full board or portions of it in the past, so some of them may look familiar about the timing of cap fees. But it's been well over a year since he's presented, so maybe it won't look as familiar, so we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
I'm almost there. Just getting used to Zoom again.
I was trying to reel it up for you with the timing.
Thanks, James. I appreciate that. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So before we get started, I think the most important thing to mention on this topic is that in talking about the timing and capacity fees, that this has absolutely nothing to do with water or sewer rates, that it doesn't affect water or sewer rates in any way. Capacity fees, as you know, are tracked separately. They're not included in the revenue requirement for water or sewer rates. So just so we start off with that, this does not affect water or sewer rates in any way. So no matter when we collect them, no effect. The other thing to note is that the current ordinance states that we will collect capacity fees at occupancy, and the capacity fees are indexed or increased every year on January 1st based on a construction inflation index. So in order to talk about the difference between collecting at inception and occupancy, we have to walk through a scenario. I think numbers is probably the best way to do it. And you've seen this before, so the only thing I've updated really is the balance of the capacity fund, because we no longer have a deficit in the capacity fund, so you'll see a positive balance now. So in going through the scenario, I'm going to make certain assumptions. So I want to look at a project that's a 2-year project that will be completed in January of year 3, and the district will be collecting 100 EDUs on this project. So if we assume that the capacity fee is $9,720, and this is, we'll say it's for a sewer EDU project. It'd be the same for water, or if it was combined, it'd just be larger numbers probably. So if we assume the rate is $9,720 in year 1 per EDU, and then we assume that the ENR, which is the construction inflation index or engineering news record, that's the inflation index we use to increase our capacity fees every January. If we assume that that's 2.5%, and the IRR is also 2.5%. We're keeping these the same for simplicity. Actually, over the last 5 years, the ENR has been 2.5% almost exactly, and the IRR has been 1.8%. So IRR is actually a little bit lower than ENR, and always has been, at least for the last 15 years. But for the sake of simplicity in this scenario, we'll keep them the same. There isn't really a major difference between the two.
So, quick question, just so I get, is that set by, is that standard set, is that internally? Who sets those?
What are they based on?
Yeah,
Yep. So the ENR is the engineering news record. It's a published inflation index, construction inflation index for engineering. So that's actually, and it's released. We actually use a December to December comparison. So the increase from December to December is that 2.5%.
so there's a standard, we can't play with those numbers at all internally.
Yeah, and
Right.
it's the cost of construction. So if you're looking at
Right.
your building infrastructure, so it's the cost of construction that's tracked all major cities across the country.
And they all use the same one?
No, there's different for different regions. We use the Southern California
But we
one,
use, I mean,
or the
all
three-city
the districts
conglomerate,
in
yeah.
this use the
So,
same
yeah,
standard
pretty much
ENR.
if you, any Southern California agency will quote ENR.
Okay.
They're all talking the same number. Obviously, if you live in Chicago, they'd be quoting a little different ENR.
Everybody south of Orange County uses the same ENR.
Yeah, probably, yeah, I believe
Okay.
everybody in California
It's
uses
not
the
like
same,
our
but,
district, okay.
yeah.
I just want to make sure we can't play with that number, it's a
Nope.
standard set, okay.
Yeah.
And
And the-
same with the IRR, is that something we can play with or no?
So just to note, the ENR is actually in the ordinance. It states that we will use the ENR for a certain region and the timing of it. So that's stated in the ordinance what will be used for that inflation. So it's not something that we can play with. It's consistent every year. And then the IR is actually our internal rate of return. So that's what we've earned on our investment. So if we take our money, we put it into LAIF or we put it into agencies, give it to Chandler, this is our return that we're getting on those investments. So any cash that we're holding, what we're getting, our investments, the returns we're getting on those.
Gotcha.
So historically, for the last 5 years, we've made about, I think it's 1.8%
Okay,
on average.
okay, thank you for yeah, okay, thank you.
And sorry, why do we need to factor in our internal rate of return?
Because if we collect, and I'll show you through the example, but if we collect the fees right now, we're going to take that money, we're going to put it into a LAIF or our investments, and we're going to earn interest on it over the next couple of years. So in order to compare occupancy, which would be a 2-year delay, to inception, we need to factor in the interest. And I'll show you in just a second. Hopefully it'll be more clear.
Yeah, and
through
that's
the
an excellent question. So usually if we collect on our normal process, when the construction agreement comes from engineering to the board, it's usually on average, and this is why Wes set up this way, around a 2-year to 3-year process before people actually get keys to their homes. Currently, we collect prior to occupancy, right before people get keys to their homes. So before, if we collected during that upfront construction agreement, we would have that money, call it 2 years in advance, maybe more, prior to occupancy. So this now gives you, he's laying out the scenario of one versus the other.
Okay, thank you.
So the table at the bottom left, you can see this is the impact on our capacity fund. So it shows the beginning balance. And then, so if we had a project that it was the same project, 2 years completed in January of year 3, but we collected the capacity fees at inception. At inception, we're going to collect the current rate at inception, which is $9,720 per EDU times 100 EDUs. So we will collect $972,000 today as soon as they've been accepted for the project, and James can give me the proper terminology on that one. And then we'll put that money in the bank. And then over the next 2 years before completion of the project, we would have collected 2.5% per year as our internal rate of return because we would have invested the money. So at year 3, or by year 3, we would have collected $49,207 in interest on that money that we invested for the 2 years. So then that's what would happen collecting at inception. You get the money today, invest it, and 2 years later at the completion of the project, you've got basically $1,021,208. If you collect at occupancy, which is what we're currently doing, now the rate or the capacity fee rate, the capacity fee has been ENR'd up. It's been inflated over 2 years at 2.5%. So the current rate at January of year 3 would be $10,212 per EDU times 100 EDUs. So we would collect $1,021,208 at the completion of project or at occupancy, which is exactly the same as what we would collected at inception plus interest. So the effect on the capacity fund is 0. The ending balance is exactly the same, and there's no difference between the two scenarios. So that's the purpose of inflating the capacity fee every year, is to kind of keep it in line with what you would have earned. But actually, I think I stated before, our IR was lower than the ENR. So in effect, we're collecting more money at occupancy than we would have if we'd invested it. So if we'd invested it, it would have been 1.8%. We wouldn't have made that 49,000. It would be a little bit lower. But moving on to another sort of scenario, and this one's based on what we just did in 2020, where we raised the sewer capacity fees by 30.3%. So in this scenario, if we collect at inception, it's going to be the same situation. We're going to have the same rate, $9,720 per EDU times 100 EDUs. So we will collect $972,000. We'll invest that money, and over the 2 years, the 2.5% interest earned will equal $49,207. So it'd be the same $1,021,000 we would have collected in the previous scenario. But next, in this case, we actually, in January 2020, we raised our sewer capacity fee after going through the capacity fee model by 30.3%. So if the developer had, or if we were collecting an occupancy, or if they decided to pay an occupancy, they would have come in, and at that time, the rate would have been, first of all, ENR'd from year one, from 9,720 up to $9,963. And then it also would have been increased by 30.3% when we did the capacity fee study. So the rate at the time of occupancy would have been $12,986. So times 100 EDUs, the district would collect $1,298,000, 2,900. Sorry, I can't talk. $1,298,577. And then the total capacity fund balance, you can see at occupancy would be much higher, and actually $277,000 higher, because we collect a lot more money. So the purpose of the scenario, of these two scenarios, was to show it's actually beneficial and almost more appropriate to collect at occupancy. It's better for the district. We get the current and more appropriate rate, because even if we did it at inception, given our ENR being lower, and pretty much in every scenario, we collect less money if we collect at inception. Some other things to note is that it's really a more fair method of collecting at occupancy, because the developers aren't putting demand on the system until they've turned on the water. So we wouldn't, bill our customers for water 2 years before they took the water. So billing developers 2 years before they've actually put demand on the system doesn't in a way isn't a fair method of collecting. And another thing I wanted to mention is that it's non-transferable, or it is transferable, and it's non-refundable. So if we collect the capacity fees at inception, we don't refund them. The district's policy is not to refund the capacity fees. So if developers decide they don't want to do the project anymore, they just abandon it, then we've got the capacity fees, and we get to keep them, which may seem like a benefit, but then say 5 years later, or even it could be longer, another developer comes and takes over the project. Well, they've now got the rights to that capacity at a rate that was 5 years ago or longer. And so the district is not going to collect any additional capacity fees. So we're really losing quite a bit of money there, because it could be 5 years later and we could have done 1 or 2 capacity studies and it would have gone up 30%, and we would have collected the 5 year ago rate for capacity fees. So it's difficult for me to see the advantage of collecting at inception versus occupancy. It almost seems like the more appropriate methodology overall is at occupancy. So with that, I have some examples of the IR and ENR, but they're not really that important. I did do the history of it. So with that, I can actually say thank you and take any questions.
No, appreciate it, Wes. Appreciate laying that out. From my perspective, I'm looking not from a district's, but from a contractor, if I'm a contractor coming in. Right now, our policy states we collect at occupancy. Are we talking about changing that from occupancy, or can we have option for the developer?
So sorry to interrupt, but one thing I did forget to mention was that the developer also, and this, I don't know if this is in line with what you're saying, Director Pennick, but the developer has an option. Like, we say we have to collect it at occupancy at the latest, but they can pay, as soon as they've got the project accepted and approved, they can come in and pay their capacity fees at that time. And our ordinance says that we will collect capacity fees at the time that they pay it.
At the time they pay, that's the rate, okay.
And that's what developers do. They will wait to pay, most of them will wait to pay it, and then if they know January, the fee is gonna go up because the new ENR comes out January 1st, if it's significant, a lot of times we'll get a rush of payments in towards the end of the year. Some developers choose to pay because just how they get the financing from the bank, and when they get the financing, the money gets released at certain points of their project, and so they have to spend that money and then show the receipts. And small developers may not have the money to pay, so they may hold out. So there's all different reasons.
Well, that's exactly my point. I'd love to be a developer-friendly agency, not, and with that, I like the flexibility, because like you nailed it. I mean, if you talk to 10 different developers, they're all gonna have 10 different ideas, if you're, depending on the size of the project. Me personally, I would probably hold on to my money and do it at occupancy, because I can, if it's a $8 million project, I'm gonna be earning 8% somewhere else, or I can put that money somewhere else, earning money for me. And then knowing that, yeah, possibility of going up at occupancy, I'm gonna pay 30%, but I earned interest on my own money for that 2-3 years of the project. Also concerned about not completing the project, and all of a sudden I paid in $6 million. It's non-refundable. Yes, it can go, I understand the non-refundable, but it can stay on that project for 20 years if you never develop it. But then if you talk to another developer, they're gonna say, no, I wanna just pay it right now, get the break, you guys, at inception. So I like that we're flexible, I think we are, and just give the developer the option. I don't know if that causes internal issues with finance, but I would like it to see, it's flexible.
We
Here's
hear
the
from our
here's the
finance
options.
guy,
Yeah,
the later the better for him.
Yeah, well, exactly, and I see what you're saying, I mean, depending on how that, if we rate increase of 30%, that's a killer. I mean, cause now you're paying, like you said, you're paying, on this scenario at least, 7,500 instead of 73, or 7.5 instead of 7.3 as far as the developer goes. But I also earned probably, $1 million on my money over the last 2 years while it's sitting in some mutual fund. So,
Yeah, most developers get their money from loans though, so it gets released at a certain point. So you're right though, there's all different scenarios.
yeah, if you're developing 6 units or if you're developing 600 units, I mean, it's just, that's why I think the flexibility is important.
Yeah, and as we go through capacity fee studies, they take a long time, and we're in constant communication with developers, and we give presentations to the board. So they're aware that the rates are probably going to go up. And what happened last time, for example, a lot of developers came in and paid their fees before we raised our rates. So they're they have the flexibility. They know that we're going to raise the rates. So a lot of them will rush in and pay it before that happens.
A good example of that is Kaiser. Before that 30% increase, they came in and paid all their fees for the new Kaiser hospital before that increase.
Yeah, so I can see that for a Kaiser, the benefit for them, but yet a guy that, is putting 6 homes up and just has 6 units, and like you said, they're not gonna have the funds available in the beginning because the bank didn't disperse those funds yet. He's not even gonna have them available to him until occupancy. So for me, the flexibility, and that's how it's set up right now. I mean,
That's the
what's the
current
purpose
setup.
of this conversation? What are we trying to do?
So it's really inform the board of
Okay.
what is set up, why it's set up currently, how it interacts with the development community currently. So right now, that's the flexibility that is existing, and really for the committee to decide, do we want to relook at this? Do we want to go somewhere else with this? Or are we happy with the current setup?
So I have some questions. I appreciate that you went through this, Wes. I do appreciate it. The 30.3%, we don't do a study to determine what our capacity fees are every year.
No.
The 30.3%, that's an anomaly, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was an anomalous year because we had not done a study for a while. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
You are correct.
Okay, so I take issue with this as an example because it's a bit of an outlier. I like the flexibility. I do like the flexibility, but what I've just heard everybody say is that this, the 277,000, this doesn't happen very often because when the developers find out there's going to be an increase, they come in and they pay their fees, which is great. It's nice for us to have that. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, I'm not sure that this example that you've given us, Wes, is a good example because I think it's an anomaly, and I think we need to bear that in mind. From a ratepayer perspective, I want us to have the money as long as possible, right, so that we can earn the interest on it, because that's what I also heard this morning. We need to be trying to earn interest on the money so that we can be in good financial shape. The developers, we need them as partners, and I appreciate that flexibility. I'm not saying necessarily that we need to move this or not move this, but I also want to address an elephant in the room, is that there is a perception out there in the public, and we've heard folks come to our meetings and they talk to us about this, that by delaying this payment, that we are doing developers favors at the expense of ratepayers. We've heard that over and over again, and I know we've tried really hard to dispel that myth, We've not been successful in that. So I wonder if there is an opportunity here to do something to help dispel that myth by perhaps requiring a deposit of a certain percentage and then allow the flexibility. And I get it, the project may not go forward and we've made a decision not to refund, but we can look at that as well. That's not fair. That's not fair for if the developer says they're going to, build something and then for whatever reason they can't build it. We do need to look at that because we want to be fair to them too. But I think that we can look at that and the sort of the rabbit hole that you went down, Wes, later on about and I'm that sort of meant that came out wrong. I'm not talking about a rabbit hole. That came out wrong. But the scenario that you sort of walked down the path of that it could lead to other things that are not fair for the developers. I think that all of that's on the table. We can always go back and try to think about that and make sure that we are being fair. I don't know. I feel like we have an opportunity here to make progress towards addressing something that we have heard from the public. And I don't know what exactly the best strategy is. I don't know what other agencies do. I don't know what the true data numbers are, because I appreciate that you walked us through an example, and I appreciate that it's a mathematical example so that we can actually see where the money goes. I would like to see our true numbers as opposed to an example. Like, how much has the rate increase gone up every year, the last 5 or 6 years? And why is that? Is that, does it just go up a few percentage points and then when we do another study, it balloons, and that's surprising. That's also not fair. So I'm not, I guess, these are all my thoughts on it. So I think that, I think there's an opportunity here thank you. I think there's an opportunity here to help us with a perception that's persistent and that has been the subject of many public comments.
So there definitely is a public perception out there with the collection of fees. There's no doubt about that. Wes's first example is a pretty good example where it shows really a break even. However, I think, Wes, you brought it up really quickly, that typically the E&R goes up quicker than in other words, we make more money collecting later than our investment. Because our investment, the way we're locked in is would you say 1.8%? Wes?
Yeah, over the last 5 years. So one thing I would like to note is that, while this may be like an anomaly with the capacity fee study, it's actually a regular occurrence. I just kind of used the capacity fee study as an example because it was a more sort of extreme example with a 30.3%. But 2021, for example, the ENR was 7%. So if you plug in the 7% where the 30% is, our internal rate of return was 0.68%. So the ENR was more than 6% higher than our IRR. So this would have been a very similar situation. We probably on this project would have earned $50,000 or collected $50,000 more just from the ENR and IRR, and that happens every year. So that's a regular occurrence. And the other thing to note is that the IRR historically, and I can show in my next example, has always been lower than the ENR. So if we collect it up front, we're actually losing money. So if we collect up front, it's in favor of the developers. It benefits the developers if we collect up front because we invested at a lower rate and they pay less later. So that's actually kind of the purpose of this scenario, was to show that we're earning less than our internal rate of return by investing it. By collecting it and investing it, we're earning less than the engineering news record is inflating the cost.
So there's definitely a divergence between reality and perception on this, and we've done some education on it, but it's going to take a while because, in most people's individual perspective, I'd rather have the money now, right? Because, that's everybody's individual perspective. The way I run my household, I'd rather have the money now. So,
time value of money tells us money now is worth, a dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow, and I'm always in favor of that. It's like, paying your taxes, same thing. Like, you keep the money paying as much as possible because you can invest it and earn it. I'm always in favor of that as a finance guy. In this case, unfortunately, though, our internal rate of return is lower. So if we have the money now, we're losing money. So.
So I heard two things, and I like them as far as the public's perception and the developer being friendly to developer. And it seems like there's a way, kind of a win-win with those two words that, and Tiffany, you alluded to this. If there's a deposit that you can put down, but then also we change it where they're refunded, like you're saying, if the developer does not go through with the project, they're refunded. And I don't know if that's industry, we can't do that?
Well, I think we can, but no agency does it. And also you have to
I mean, that's a
remember,
huge-
once you pay a capacity fee, that gets tied to the property, it actually increases the land value of the property. So what we've had in the past is developers try and play games where
Right.
they do something, they revert it back to a different type of land use, and then they sell the property, and then they try and get a refund, because they sold the property with capacity
Oh,
rights on it.
that's a
So
good
basically,
point.
it's what they bought is water sewer rights.
Right.
Okay, now you just increase, so as soon as you do that, the developer doesn't actually lose money. If it costs $30,000 for water and sewer rights on the property, the value of the property goes up the same amount or more. So a lot of times in the developer game, on the long-range planning side, when I work with their planners, that value is known, and they complain about paying the capacity fee, but they fully acknowledge that if they paid $30,000 for a capacity fee in a market that's increasing, now granted, the market changes, they may get $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on the back end when they sell that property, because it has the rights.
And that's where I think the public perception comes in, where we're subsidizing in some way, to use that word that nobody likes to use. And I wonder if policy, because I understand buying the water rights when you pay that inception.
Yeah, so now it's tied to that parcel. So no matter how many times it changes over, and engineering deals with this all the time, a property will come in,
Right.
right? They paid capacity fees in the 80s,
Right.
90s, at $500 of 1980s dollars
Right.
for water, sewer, whatever it is. I'm making up the numbers, so don't quote me on it.
Right.
But when the person sold that property to the developer who's going to develop it, it increased the value tremendously, because that water rights is tied to it. So that's one of the reasons why no agency that I know of, there may be some out there, refunds capacity. CWA doesn't refund
Really?
capacity for us, for example. If
So
we
there's no way
pay-
to untie that. I mean, it seems like they could just untie it. Like you say,
So-
it's tied to that property. If they don't develop and they decide they want a refund instead of continuing those water rights,
Yeah.
then they just have to untie it. And
Yeah, I'm not saying
now
it's
the
not
value goes
I'm just-
down.
Yeah, definitely direct the price. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying no agency does it, because I think you start going down a rabbit hole with land rights and land
Yeah,
value and
I see
everything
that,
else.
yeah. I mean, it does get,
Because it's not only tied, it's actually on the assessor parcel map. As soon as they do it, it's in the county, it's throughout, it's pervasive.
at inception, at purchase.
Whenever they purchase it.
Whenever they purchase the
Whenever they
property.
purchase it, yeah. Then
And
all of a
it's
sudden, it.
Currently, it's tied to that for forever,
Perpetuity.
until it's, yeah.
And it doesn't, once it is bought, once the parcel is sold and the water rights have been established, at that point in time, if there is some buying and selling in the future, then the new buyer does not have to pay again the market rate value of the capacity. Am I hearing, because that doesn't seem fair.
So what happens, let's say there's one water meter on site, and we'll call it a one EDU, one equivalent dwelling unit, and they're building two. They bought the property, they're building two. They only pay for one additional at the current rate.
Okay.
The one that's
clear.
there,
Yeah,
the one
okay,
that's
I
there,
got
it's
that.
grandfathered in. So if they don't need it, so in other words, we have plenty of developments where there was 4 or 5 meters on site, and now they're building a bigger complex, and they got credit for the amount of, meters, equivalent meters, and they only pay for the delta, the increase.
Yeah.
And they pay the current rate.
To me, that seems like a flawed system. So if
It-
somebody buys something, and I'm sorry, this is taking up some time, but I think it's important to say, if someone buys a property 1980s with 1980s dollars, and let's say we were using a half-inch pipe back then, and they buy capacity, and now, there's been some buying and selling or whatever, and now we're using, a larger pipe, we need more capacity. They don't make any further payment on that particular
No, but
meter?
they're conditioned to do all the upgrades that's required to meet the current standards for their
Okay.
property. So in
Okay.
other words, if they have to increase because of fire flow, or if the
Okay.
sewer line is no longer available to handle the flow,
Mm-hmm.
then they're gonna be conditioned through our water sewer, which is a separate subject, our water sewer studies, which we're gonna push to January, on actually putting in what properly is to serve their potential land use.
Okay, all right. I do have another question. It's a slightly different direction, but, you know, with the pandemic and supply chain issues and inflation, the construction inflation index, you know, and it says here in 2021, it was 7.01%. It seems like if we are going to have years where it's kind of a roller coaster, I wonder if there's a way, and it says, you know, I know that it says in the policy that we base the rates on ENR, but is there a way to insulate that a little bit for for developers? I mean, it seems like that's a roller coaster potentially if we continue to have high inflation.
Yeah, so
Am I right about that? Am I thinking about that correctly?
Well, yeah, so you're correct. So if the ENR jumps up a lot, then the developer will pay whatever that increase is. That's correct, right, Russ?
Yes.
Okay. So, however, unlike our rate system, which is a completely different fund, we don't have reserves built up or a rate stabilization type mechanism for the developer, and we do not want to use customer rate money
Sure.
to stabilize and collect later. Because here's the problem with development is they are projected to build X amount of homes or X amount a year, but there's no guarantee that that's going to happen in the quantity or the timing that they've projected. City of San Marcos General Land Use, which you guys have both sat on, has a housing element, and I forgot what the numbers are. It's 7,000 EDUs or something like that over the next 8 years. That's the plan. There's no guarantee it'll come in at that pace because market factors will prevail and developers will do whatever's in the best interest depending on what they have approved. So unfortunately, there's not a mechanism in place unless you collect additional, because we don't collect any additional monies for reserves in the developer account. It's earmarked directly for future CIP projects that support growth.
Well, it's important to note too that the reason we use the NR is because the assumption is that our costs are going to go up by that same amount.
Yep.
So
Okay.
we're raising the
Thank you.
capacity
That's
fees
a
by
good point.
7% because we're assuming our construction costs are going to go up by 7%, which is the inflation rate, which makes sense as far as.
That does make sense.
And
Okay.
that's not just an assumption. It's really, our construction costs have gone up significantly this year.
I bet they have, and I bet they're gonna, 2022, it's gonna go up again. Okay. What are you looking for from us for this? Because I think we've asked a lot of questions, and I don't think that Director Pennock or I are invested in one particular outcome. I think that it's worth talking about further. Is that fair? Is that fair?
Yeah, so from a staff standpoint, this is one of the items that the full board, through General Manager Prum's, I think, evaluation, wanted to take a look at several policies and ordinances. This is one of the ones that obviously was in the tier 1 group, so to speak. Staff is fairly happy with the current policy. We feel that it provides flexibility, and we know there's a break even at worst, but most likely a benefit for us when the developer does pay later, understanding that they have the options to pay sooner, but at that point, we are investing the money. If the committee wants to have further discussion on this, we could obviously bring it back. If there's recommendation to keep it the same, we could just report back to the board. Right now, it provides kind of the greatest flexibility on the developer side from being friendly, but yet still provides us as staff for the district really the best opportunity. So in other words, if they do pay early, we invest it. If they pay later, we actually collect more.
I think it's also worth noting, excuse me, that we didn't always do it this way, right? Vallecitos didn't always do it this way.
Yep.
So what I would like to see, and this is never an empty offer from me. Like, I'm happy to put together a table if you send me the information. It's never an empty offer, but I also want to be cognizant that I don't want to place a lot of burden on staff. You know, it used to be collected at inception, right?
Yeah, at what we call a construction agreement. So that's
Okay.
basically we're awarding the developer, yes, you can move forward and start building stuff.
Is it possible to look at, you know, kind of a before and after? Like when we used to collect it, because the change was made when, 2012?
I
2014?
thought it was more either 14 or 16 is my
Okay.
recall. I don't, do you know, Wes, by any chance?
Yeah, 14 sounds more
2014?
likely.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's possible to look at, you know, the actuals of, you know, did it benefit us, you know, overall, you know, actually it has benefited us using real numbers year over year to collect at occupancy.
Wes, could we do that and then and maybe take out the current, you know, going out for the current debt service out, because that'll muddy up the numbers? Or could you do that both ways?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably look at what we've collected based on total dollars, EDUs, and see, you know, kind of do scenarios if we'd invested it versus,
Yeah.
you know, what was inflated up. There's probably, we'll take a look at it, Mike and I can see what we can do as far as putting together a comparison.
And you know, in the before times as well, you know, when
Yeah.
we were collecting at inception, I think that showing those numbers and explaining it in very in very explicit terms might benefit us from the public perception standpoint.
Yeah, why don't we, it may take a little bit of time for finance to pull it together, because
Sure.
it is quite a bit of data. So the way I envision it, and Wes, correct me if I'm overstating or understating something, is we could look at how we collected the monies, actual collection, and how that ended up, where our balances were based on that, compared to what if we never changed policy and what our balances would have been, based
Yeah,
on
so.
based
so-
on, you know, based on our investment. So notice if
Yeah,
we
so-
collected everything up front, we would, at the end of the day, we would have X amount of money. But since we collected it with this flexibility, we ended up with X amount of money. So this way you can actually see real of how we are today compared to if we never changed policy, where we'd be today.
No, I don't. Sure, you can do that, but I would like to see it actually how it was done.
That's what I'm saying.
Not projected out, not how we. So you know, you've got sort of pre-2000. Let's say the change was 2016. You've got pre-2016. You got post-2016. I want to see, you know, on your previous slide, Wes, if you could just go back. So I want to see, you know, assumptions like your second scenario, the scenario on the right hand side, beginning balance, capacity fees, interest earnings, ending balance. You know,
Yep.
before 2016, year over year, you know, a couple of years after 2016, a couple of years, and see, you know, is it the case that the flexibility has benefited us with the rate increases? Because, like you said, if there's going to be a significant rate increase, then it gets paid off beforehand.
Not always, but it can.
Yeah. So this, you know, 277,000, it might be significantly less than that.
So this is a very controlled sample that
Sure.
he's given you, and the reason why he's giving you a controlled sample is because you have other inputs and outputs. So example, Jason's group is spending money out of, so you'd have to know burn rate or a relative amount of money that was burned by funding capital projects, and then any debt proceeds coming in. So there's a lot of inputs, outputs, so the numbers
It's
are gonna look, you're
complicated.
not gonna see a comparison, so, because they're two different data sets.
Yeah, and if you look at like before when we were collecting at inception, you're going to have lower rates that are changing at inception, different amounts of EDUs. So we can't do a time versus a time either. So we couldn't do like 2010 or say 8 to 12 versus 13 to 18 because they'd be so many different variables in there that they're not comparable. You could say this is what actually happened, but you wouldn't be able to say that's why it happened, really. It'd be very difficult to do that because, as James mentioned, there's a lot of variables in there. What we could do, though, is say, in 2008 through 12, we collected an inception. Here are the number of EDUs. Here's the rate. They were, we invested and earned this much money on it. So there's the total. Now, alternatively, those same numbers, same number of EDUs collected, different rates, because now we're saying the ENR rates, what we would have collected from 2008 to 2012. So actual compared to if it were
Projected, yeah.
we could do something like that. I think we can make that work. But saying, this time period is just, that'd be more difficult.
And Director, we could do what you're asking, but you won't get any actionable data that you can interpret out of it, because it's two separate data points. And the thing that really messes it up is Jason spending all that money out of it. So you'll see a lower amount, but it won't mean anything, because we also built a lot more projects. Or we might see a lot higher amount, but you know what? It was post-recession, and we held back projects.
I totally understand that, and Jason's been spending money for a long time, so I get that. So I understand that, you've been here for a while, so we can control for all of those variables, because they're the same variables-ish, right? There are always a bunch of variables, even before 2016 and after 2016.
Different interest rates and everything.
Totally, but Wes, what you did on this slide with actual numbers, I think would be really, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And not just helpful because I'm asking, I think it would be helpful for the district to try to explain this in a more explicit way so that the public understands.
Well, we could definitely show you both data sets. I still highly recommend Wes actually pick one data set and say, okay, if we never change policy, this is what it looked like. Then you would have same variables across the board with two different policies to find two different end numbers.
And that's good. Yeah, and James, we're saying the same thing. So if we just said, 2014, we changed policy, right? So 2014 to 2022, the amount of EDUs collected at the rates, the total amount we've collected, the actuals, how would that compare if we kept it at inception, right? So if we kept it at inception, we would have had the same number of EDUs at different rates, because it would have been, well, not the same rates because it would have been ENR, but we would have earned interest. So the difference there would be the interest earned and the timing of the collections. What's difficult about that, though, is saying, when did those projects, we'd have to look at the agreements of the projects, when the difference between when they would have been collected and when they were actually collected. So that's kind of the complication there. So, you've got several different projects over those years. If one is, they paid at inception and it was completed, we'd have to look at each individual project to say, okay, of the 600 EDUs we collected that year, we had 17 projects. We have to go into each project and say, inception versus occupancy, how much interest we would have earned over that time period. So that becomes a little difficult too.
Well, Wes, I think we can simplify that, because we have the actual, so it doesn't matter when they actually chose to pay for moving forward. If we tried to look back, it'd be a nightmare, because then you'd have to chase down every single project, every single construction agreement, and every single acceptance.
But how do you get the interest that you would have earned on those? Because let's say our current project.
Let me finish. What I'm saying is, on the existing scenario, the numbers are whatever they are, because it's whenever they came in, and they're the actual numbers. When you compare them, we just have to chase down the construction agreement on that, and then you have to just run the scenario based on when that construction agreement for those EDUs got. So it's a bunch of work for engineering to get to you, and then it's a bunch of work for you, but I think it simplifies it. So in other words, we fully need to acknowledge, and the directors here have said this, I think, correctly, that the developers have the flexibility to pay it whenever they want, so they usually take advantage of that depending on their individual scenarios. So here's the actual what we collected based on existing policy, and if we never change policy, this is what it would have been. And that'll give true reference, a 2-point reference, under the same data set. So this way, not only the public, but the board could actually see the difference between how the policy affected our bottom line. And I think that's really what we're getting down to. At least I'm hoping.
So we'd have to select a time frame, and we'd have to say, okay, how many projects were paid for during that time frame? Say it was, I'd just say 10. Then we'd have to go to each project and say, we know we actually have. If they paid at inception, what was the inception date on those 10 projects? And what was the rate at that time?
And we have those, we could find those, because we have board action for each one of those projects moving forward. We'll miss a few, the smaller ones, the mom and pops, somebody build a single family home, something that never goes to the board, but we'll get the majority of them.
Well, I hate to make it more complicated, but then you say we collected at inception. what was the interest rate from the time of inception to when they actually paid at completion? How much, and we'd have to calculate that interest for all 10 projects.
Yeah, but we have our internal rate of return for
Right.
those years, so we could probably use that. We could talk more offline, I don't wanna take up the full committee, but I
Yep.
think we could get pretty close. We'll have to state our assumptions, to give you a true comparison
For sure.
of
Yep.
never changing policy, here's what the numbers are, and what our current actuals.
So I just wanted to go through all that, not to take up too much time, but that's why I wanted to make sure that's the goal of the committee, Director Boyd Hodgson and Pennick, if that's what you're looking for, is for us to take the numbers we just went through.
The desired outcome for me is that we can justify to the public why we do the things that we do, right? I mean, for anything that we talk about. And in particular with this issue, it's prickly for the public. We know that. What I want to be able to show is, and learn from, because this is, I'm not invested in one way or the other. But I do hear the public. I do hear them and I see them when they come to our meetings and they are very convinced about certain things, about the way we do business. So what would be ideal for me is to understand, and I understand all of this that you have presented. I want a fair depiction in a year that's not anomalous, in years that we have gone through the process as we are supposed to with assessing our capacity fees and then raising them appropriately, because I know we were very lax in doing that for a while. So that we can see, here's the way it happened when we collected in inception. And if it turns out we collected the money, we invested it, and our internal rate of return never enabled us to overcome what the ENR directed us to collect at the end of the project, then that is what it is. And that's important for us to be able to show.
Yeah, and I think we could get you there, especially with looking at the years from, let's say it's 2014, and we'll stop it before the rate increase. So it might be 2014 to 2019 or something to that effect. So you could just see that based on, that's less variables. So there's no cap fee increase. So really then it's just a pure exercise between internal rate of return and ENR and the projects that we built.
You okay with all that?
I am. No, there's a lot said. I mean, in fact, I'm still thinking about the policy, and we have an opportunity to be a trendsetter.
We do.
By, like you're saying, you don't know any other district. I agree with everything. I don't want to pass that over, because, yeah, you've talked about it a lot, and I agree. I appreciate what you're wanting to accomplish with that. And there is a fine line between developers and perception of the public and who's subsidizing who and what's going on and how, where's the district fall in. And it just seems like I'm still looking in my own mind a way to help with that. And I do. The water rights, I understand. Non-refundable, I understand. But I think a different policy might help with that is by having a non-refundable deposit, but a refundable cap fee. I think that would help public perception understand that we're not subsidizing anything. And I understand nobody's doing that right now, but if I buy a property and I put on a cap, I pay the cap fees and I know the value of that property goes up, if I decide to sell that property to the new developer, I would get refunded those cap fees back, and I understand the value of that property goes down, that unties those water rights, but it does, and then it doesn't go on like you're saying. You pay these, buy a project in 1980, and all of a sudden, that's 1980 money, and it goes. That seems like it's a way not to have long-term water rights. I don't know, I don't know where I'm seeing it, but I would like to see a policy where you pay a non-refundable deposit, kind of like our cap fees right now, and then a refundable to the developer if they decide not to develop, refundable cap fees if they pay at inception instead of occupancy. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's the only time.
It's a different policy, I understand, industry-wide.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely dig into that, and I don't know if this policy doesn't really cover that.
This
obviously,
one
but-
does, that's what I'm trying,
Yeah, but
is
how,
that helpful? Would that muddy up the waters? Does that seem like it would be more public friendly / developer friendly, both? Because then it just seems like it would be friendly to both.
Clearer. It
Clearer.
might be
Does it?
clearer and help everyone understand.
And I don't know if it's muddier or
explicitly.
clearer, but to me,
I
it seems
don't
like it would be clearer by saying, okay, now we're not gonna, to the developer, they can't get, especially if it's a large development, they're never gonna get those their cap fees back if they pay at inception. To the public, it says, okay, now we're not going to, we're not, as a district, we're not subsidizing anybody.
Yeah,
'cause
so
there's
one
a
of
refundable
the
deposit.
drivers to have cap fees delayed from the development community is because the cap fees are not refundable. That's one of the drivers to delay them in the first place, to
Right.
provide that flexibility. I understand that portion of it. The other thing is, once the cap fee is tied to the parcel of land, then it's tied in, just like anything else in real estate, it's part of the disclosures, it's part of the value of the property, and it's part of the entitlements. So it goes through a whole entitling process, at the city level, at the county level, and those cap fees and the water rights and the sewer service rights are both tied to the property. So us refunding it doesn't necessarily tell the county and the cities that those property rights and entitlements aren't refunded. So there's a whole
You'd have to re-record.
re-record everything, yes. And the only times we've ever even considered that is when the developer has issued the property back to open space or some type of unusable land. That's a different anomaly. Now, the policy being written the way it is more advantageous for staff. It simplifies for staff, and I think that's probably why every agency does it that way. However, we have brought back to the board for a variance where the policy and what the developer action may not, and the board always has that authority and right. So in other words, it doesn't meet policy, but there's something that the staff says, okay, we understand this should probably go to the board. We would come back to the board and say, here's a situation where our policy doesn't fit the mold, and here's why for board consideration. And that has and does happen. It's rare, because most people don't revert back to land or open space unless a conservancy or somebody buys it or something to that aspect. And that does happen. It hasn't happened in a while, but it has happened in my career.
No, I appreciate the work thus far, yeah, no, I mean, again, this is mainly discussion, and I like it, and it just kind of creates your brain juices going.
Yeah, we always say from a staff's perspective, we want the policy to basically be straightforward without a lot of off-roads, and then we have committee and board processes for those variances. And there's been several times, even this board, we've come back and asked for a variance, because what's happening out there in real life, the policy doesn't fit quite right.
Right,
And that has always been a good way to work, because if the policy's too open, then you get everybody trying to take advantage of it.
Agreed.
Well, I think we're aligned with this, that we
I agree.
want to keep talking about it, and we'd like some room for creativity. We've asked you to do some work, and I appreciate your patience with our questions and asks. But I do, we have a perception in the public, I think, and this might be a way to help us get through that and provide some data that are convincing. And I think we should be thinking about this with that eye as well. I mean, we are the Public Awareness Committee as well as the Policy Committee. So I think it fits.
Definitely. So we'll just so I'm clear, we'll go forward. I'll work with Jason and Wes to pick a time step that doesn't have an anomaly, to say this is what we actually did, and if we never change policy, this is what the numbers would be like, and we'll put that together. I don't know when it will take, but we'll at least report at the next P3 with a timing of when we'll bring it back.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes.
Thanks, Wes.
Thanks,
Hope you feel
everyone.
better.
Thanks.
Okay, next is Board Orientation Handbook.
Yeah, so this board handbook is being updated currently,
Okay.
and it's unfortunately not ready unless Rondi gave you something. Okay, so sorry, since I was off last week, I'm a little disconnected. So we are going to be working through the handbook and obviously waiting for some updates since we have an MOU negotiation coming up, which will also affect the handbook. With the board orientation portion of it, the main discussion point, and I think it was brought up, I can't remember by which board member, is there certain items they want to see in there. Currently, we give the board, obviously, where the district maps are, the main, almost like the employee handbook, truncated version. Obviously, everything to do with per diems, meetings, and general governance. We also provide links to our planning documents, master plan, different important planning documents, and walk through it and kind of go through a board orientation. In the future, we're looking at adding more to that board orientation procedure, almost a handbook that may say, these are the steps that a new board member that we're going to kind of onboard, excuse the pun, the board on. But is there anything that the P3 committee would like to see or not see or change from the existing handbook, which I know that both committee members kind of came on board during the pandemic, so it wasn't a normal process. So, but I know you guys have at least at one point seen some of the information, and I know there's been expression of it'd be nice to add this or do something different.
And maybe this is me, but I don't remember getting the
Okay.
handbook.
So maybe this is maybe creating a new handbook.
Did we get the handbook?
I think we did.
Okay,
I
Yeah.
did.
maybe I did get it.
Yeah, I
Brings
don't
up my
th-
point, I would love an I don't know if it's an electronic
Yeah.
version? Do you have an electronic version instead of a
Well,
3-ring binder version?
I don't know. I've seen the 3-ring binder version. I don't.
I got a 3-ring binder version, that's why I
You did?
saw it.
Okay.
Have I,
Yeah.
have I marked it all up? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the electronic
Clearly I
version would
haven't
be,
either.
that's my only
Okay.
recommendation would be, and especially, long-term, an electronic version would, one, save on printing, and I think it would be more accessible.
Okay.
Is it possible to have a board portal on the website where we could potentially
Access it.
access all of these important documents, that only board members have
Yeah.
access, well, and, top management, but that way we can continue to re-access. Is that a big ask, or is it?
If I could just jump in
Yeah.
too, so it is the 3-ring binder, it's rather large, it's really outdated. And myself and along with General Manager Prune, we have a meeting scheduled to go through it.
Okay,
We went through the table of context pretty quickly and striking a whole lot of information and data out of that. And, like Assistant General Manager Gumpel said, trying to streamline the process of what the board directors actually need and what they're actually gonna use.
Yep.
Stuff like that, like how we do travels, expense claims, per diem sheets, the district map, stuff of that nature. I've had some brief discussions with IT about possible online portal. Again, those discussions will be had with the team, and then if we can do that or not. But again, going electronic would be fantastic. A lot of information is on the website, so stuff of that nature. But again, we're still meeting to try to discuss and lock down a more streamlined version of the board member handbook, orientation handbook, so to speak.
So I do recall it's probably a good paperweight somewhere in the corner. So it's fairly large, but yeah, definitely we're looking at any type of input. I think the portal is a great idea if we could get it done. Obviously, we'll have to talk to IT. Anthony is way ahead of me on this, so I appreciate that.
Right, so I think once we have an update we're gonna get together as a team, see what we actually wanna put in there, see what actually is online, and if we can create that portal, great. If not, it might just be another handbook, certainly electronic where we can scan stuff in, have live links possibly of that nature as we move forward to that, but definitely gonna meet with the team and try to see what we can identify of what the true needs would be for the directors.
thank you.
All right,
Yeah,
so-
and I'm fully supportive of going electronic as well.
Okay, great. So we'll basically work on that, Anthony, and not to put you on the spot, was there kind of timeline between IT and you and Ann to try and get a draft of what would be in there? as
It will
far as-
depend, we actually have the meeting, I think, scheduled for tomorrow.
Okay.
For our initial kickoff meeting, Ann and I have been discussing, going back and forth with our own ideas, based on the current handbook and the table of contents. I will let you know, it's like, our ideas are to revamp the whole thing, so trying to get that 4-inch binder to at least a 1-inch binder.
So,
But after the meeting tomorrow, we have more information on the timeline, and then, of course, with the new committee makeups and the new,
Yep.
organization, the board stuff in the new year, so.
all right, so what I envision happening is staff will get together, and like I said, Anthony's way ahead of me on this one. And we'll probably put together a new table of contents and probably come back to the committee at a later date and then make for your review and any recommendations to add. Also talk about where we are and whether we can get a portal going in that process.
Okay, great. What color is the binder? Is it blue?
White.
Is it white? Okay,
Mine says,
I'm not sure.
mine
I
just
got
says
it.
orientation and then says,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna look.
I looked at it 2 years ago,
Okay, all right. It's white, all right.
but
I'll
I don't
look
want
for
to
it.
disclose that to the public on this recorded meeting.
Your secret's safe with us.
Thank you, thank you.
We'll have public comment next time, I'm sure, in the new committee room.
Just trying to generate some more public interest.
So, okay, I think those are all the items for discussion. And the next meeting date will be TBD because I'm not sure if we will be members on this committee anymore, right? Because
that's
we're
a good
going through
point.
the reorg.
That's a good point.
So I don't think that we can set the next date. I think that'll be up to the next committee chair and
Yep.
members. And I thank you all for your service. Thank you for being with us on this committee. It's been a pleasure to serve with you, Director Pennock.
Likewise.
Thank you. And I guess, unless there are any other comments? Any other comments? Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you so
holidays,
much.
everyone.
Happy holidays.